Welcome to Cohn and Krueger. That's Larry Krueger. I'm Grant Cohn. The theme of the show today is changes the Niners need to make this season. The Niners are an enigma because on the one hand, since 2019, I feel like all of us have been saying, man, they might have the best roster in the league and the best coach. Or a lot of people say stuff like that. And yet they haven't gotten the Super Bowl yet. And when you put it like that and ask people why, they're like, I don't, luck, or maybe it's injuries, or I think there's got to be something the Niners can take control of, something they can change that's under their control to bring this Lombardi trophy home. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So let's talk about Kyle Shanahan and his play calling. How could he change that for the better?
I think he needs to go for it more and value offensive possessions a little bit more. So you're not going for it inside your 30, and you're not going for it on 4th and 6.
Sure.
But to me, if you're outside your 30 and you're 4th and 5 or less, I think that you got to look at the analytics and see that the league trend is to go for it more. And I think I would you put a lot of money in your offense. You got a lot of guys handling the ball. You want handling the ball. I think I would value each and every possession a little bit more and go for it a tad more. And no more punting from midfield or on your opponent's side of the field on 4th and 3 or less. I mean, there should never be almost ever a time where you punt anywhere between the 45 and the other team's goal line when it's 4th and 3 or less. That's like, no doubt, got to go for it. Don't think about it. Just go for it.
And I was going back to me, the toughest loss of this Shanahan era was that NFC Championship game against the Rams, because that wasn't a great Rams team and the Niners had beaten them 6 times in a row. It felt like they could have won that game. And I believe the Niners punted from inside Rams territory like 2 or 3 times in that game. So this would be a great place for Kyle Shanahan to start. You have all this talent on offense. You have a million different ways that you can pick up 3, 4, 5 yards with all these players. Why are you punting? I know you like Mitch Wishnowsky, and he is a good punter. He is a playmaker. The knuckle punt? Just kidding. No, keep your offense on the field.
Definitely keep your offense on the field. That game was so frustrating because you knew the Rams wanted in that final drive to go to Cooper Kupp, and they did. And it would have been so nice to force them to do anything but Stafford to Kupp. And
Meanwhile, the Niners
did.
Kyle stopped going to Debo, and it's not like the Rams forced him to. So that to me right there is I think that's the toughest loss. You can say, I understand they lost to the Chiefs. The Chiefs had Patrick Mahomes. They're better than the 49ers. Sure. Eagles, that was a hell of a team. They lost 2 games all year when Jalen Hurts was healthy? Sure. But that Rams team, they're 9th on offense, 17th on defense, squeaked out a Super Bowl victory over the Bengals, who the Niners beat in Cincinnati. That's a tough one. I think they're always going to look back at that year and say, we had the best player in the league in Debo, and he didn't get the ball with 13 minutes left. That's on us.
Yeah, I really didn't like that. That's 2 big games, really. The Kansas City Super Bowl and that Ram game where Debo was allowed to not be a big part of it in the key moments.
Yeah.
And you know what? I just think beyond this regime, beyond this era, going back to the Niners of yesteryear, they didn't go away from Jerry. They went to Jerry. They didn't go away from Roger. They went to Roger. So I think it's easier said than done, but in hindsight, I'd like to see them go for it more. And I'll tell you one other thing I'd love to see is I'd love to see them use, it's a copycat league. The Eagles have had a ton of success with that rugby scrum short yardage play. And the 49ers have a fullback on their roster. They've got good backup offensive linemen. They could run that play as well as Philly runs that play. They even have quarterbacks who I think can do it now. And they always really have. Jimmy's always been a good quarterback sneak guy. I think Brock can be that. Trey can be that. So Darnold's a big-bodied guy. Get your big people on the field like Harbaugh used to in short yardage, and rugby scrum it. Especially since, Grant, they don't blow the whistle for forward progress. They let that play go. So it's like you get one surge, and then you get a second surge. And if they blow it late, you may even get a third surge. Yeah. And I think the Eagles may have averaged 3 yards plus per attempt, and that's a lot on short yardage.
I think the thing that's most discouraging about Kyle and the things he needs to improve is that some of them may not be things he can improve on. I really think sometimes his brain gets a little frazzled under pressure. Like he's known, you talk about things like Bill Walsh, the drive, the catch, like those are moments of clutchness from Bill Walsh that led to being a champion. With Kyle, it's all like, like the collapse or the drop or the this or the excuse or the, I don't like him not challenging that fourth down play in Philly. That was the game. That was the game. And he let it slip through his hands right there. He could have gotten the ball, turnover on downs, 0-0 early in the game, but he didn't have it. And I think with him, it's like you could have a 10-game winning streak, a 12-game winning streak, but if the pressure's on and you're a little nervous, what are you going to do? That's discouraging about Kyle. I almost feel like he gets tight.
Well, I'll say this as far as that play in Philly.
Yeah.
I do understand what he's thinking there from the standpoint of we don't want to waste our challenge early, but that's a regular season idea.
Yeah.
And in the playoffs, things happen fast. And the biggest play of the game could potentially be the first play of the game. It's not your birthright to have the game settle into a regular flow. And I feel bad. I feel bad for him in that one a little bit, simply because I felt like I don't know what the Niners had as far as I don't know what views they had. All I know is the views that I had. I didn't get a view that said challenge that until it was already done. So the first indication was Hufanga saying incomplete. That was the
players
first
on
indication.
the field. The players on the field.
Second indication was Hurts and the offense sprinting 40 yards down the field. At that point, I'm throwing the flag and I'm gambling. Now they could have deked me into it, right? Because I still may not have had a good look at it, but those two factors, my own player singing complete and then them sprinting down, would be enough evidence for me to throw that flag. But I understand the thinking. It's like, got to save it for at least till the game gets rolling. But that was a crucial play.
I mean, you have two challenges, and I think the beginning of the game was crucial because both teams are built essentially the same way. Take the lead early and play with a lead. Neither team wants to play from behind or has very much experience playing from behind and aren't particularly successful scoring points from behind. So the Niners deferred. They won the coin toss in that game and chose to play defense first. They were banking on their number one defense getting stopped. And they did. They did. Yeah. They freaking did. And Kyle didn't throw the challenge. It's a tough one.
The one that's really tough for me in that game too is you're down 7 and you're instead of just saying, hey, let's waste the clock. To me, once Brock
survive.
Went out, the game plan should have been, let's get to the fourth within a touchdown. If we get to the fourth within a touchdown, anything can happen. And instead,
we could win on special teams. We could get a pick six. All that. Yep.
Yeah. And Josh, also, I think the other lesson is don't have any quarterback. I mean, I love Josh. His agent's a buddy of mine, but don't let anybody be a quarterback on your roster that can't come in and play.
Yeah. Good call. All right. Moving on. Give me a training camp sleeper that you're expecting to break out. A sleeper.
I got a couple. Jordan Mason for sure. If he's a sleeper, I don't know if he's a sleeper, but I think he could definitely break out. I loved how thin and how light he looked, how explosive he looked. He was probably 240 last year, no fat, but this year he looks like 225, 228, and just fast. And so I think he has enough talent to really bust out. And then on defense, Kalia Davis, 93 up front. I mean, he's sitting third on the depth chart. You got Hargrave, you got Armstead, you got Kinlaw, you got Givens, you got T.Y. McGill. But Kalia Davis has the kind of speed at defensive tackle that could be a game-changing type speed. And he was a linebacker in college. He kept getting bigger and bigger, but the production, the motor, the foot speed, I think he's 315 pounds. I think he's got potential to really show up and 315-pound guys don't move like that. It was an incredible draft choice if he fulfills his potential. Now, last year was his redshirt year. This is his go year. Nobody's banking on him. I think Kalia Davis could make a huge impact.
Good call. I'm looking at the wide receivers. The way I look at it is the top 4 guys are set: Debo, Ayuk, Jawan Jennings, Ray McCloud. I'm not sure they're going to keep 6 wide receivers. They look like they're going to be keeping more tight ends. Maybe it's a 5 wide receiver roster, in which case, who's it going to be? I think a lot of people would assume Danny Gray, but this team will waive a 3rd-round pick real quick. And although he is a deep threat, he drops a lot of passes. He catches with his chest. It is no guarantee. He might get this job, but there's no guarantee he makes the team. And if it's not him, it could be Ronnie Bell. We saw him get a lot of targets in the offseason, and it also could be Tay Martin. Ronnie Bell drops some balls. Tay Martin does not drop the ball. Now, I don't know if he moves as well as Ronnie Bell. I'm intrigued with Tay Martin. I feel like that's a guy who's a real deep sleeper and who could actually make the team ahead of both of them as the number 5 wide receiver.
It's funny. I see this. I agree with you, but I see this a little differently. I'm excited as heck about the wide receivers, Grant, because Ayuk and Debo are both really good and really intent on being the best they've ever been, which could be a key to the season. But Jennings is that chain mover, and Gray's the guy who's the complementary piece that runs off the coverage. I don't think Bell or Martin take Gray's job. I think Bell or Martin take Jawan's job. And I know Jawan's established, but I think also if they get down to it, and if Ronnie Bell and Tay Martin have a good preseason and Jawan Jennings' preseason is just okay, there's enough former 49er people around the league that like Jawan, I bet, that they may be able to get a 5th round or a 6th round pick in next year's draft for Jawan. He's a free agent at the end of the year. I think there's very little chance that they'll pay him anything significant. And I think he's the guy who could be in harm's way if Bell and Tay Martin go off. And I expect Bell and Tay Martin to be really, really good. So I think Gray's more battling, Ray, but I've talked to Kyle about Gray, and it's when you're a play caller, you got to have that complimentary receiver who's got home run ability. So unless Gray just falls on his face, I think he's on this team.
Yeah. I see, I would bet $1,000 that Jawan Jennings is going to be on this team. There's no question.
I know.
So
I hear
that's
you,
just how I feel.
Yeah.
With Danny Gray, the thing with Danny Gray is he is really fast and he can run off coverage, but he doesn't really play special teams. He had 19 snaps on special teams last year.
But he did make 2 key tackles on special teams late in the year, didn't he?
He did, but he's a wide receiver. I mean, he's not an asset on special teams. He had 87 snaps on offense last year. He's very limited. He's not on the field very much.
No.
So I'm just curious, they drafted Ronnie Bell for a reason. Ronnie Bell got a lot more targets in the offseason in front of the media than Danny Gray did. If Ronnie Bell plays better than Danny Gray, even though their skill sets are different, I mean, if they're anticipating Brock Purdy being their guy for the next 2-3 years, I'm not sure Danny Gray fits his team anymore. Because Brock Purdy can do a lot of stuff, but I think Danny Gray was here for Trey.
No, I agree. I think, but I think Danny Gray also was here to make sure that Ayuk, Debo, Kittle, and McCaffrey don't just get beaten up underneath. So I really think that Bell and Martin are going to fire, and I think they drafted Bell with an idea that they need a continuity piece to catch those key passes on 3rd down, and they're not going to pay Jawan. I mean, I know what you're saying, though, because Jawan is a key leader in the room. He's a big personality.
Kyle loves him.
The players love him.
They won't re-sign him, but I just can't see them getting rid of him early. But I got one more sleeper. Braden Willis.
Braden
Willis. I think this is the Niners Ben Skoranek. They're a little different. I know Ben Skoranek's the wide receiver, but the whole idea of taking a non-fullback and motioning him into the backfield and using him as a fullback, I think that's kind of what the Niners want to do with Braden Willis eventually. And he was drafted right around the same spot as Skoranek was. That's a guy I think is going to be a big part of what they do.
I love that one. I totally concur on that. In fact, I'll go further and say, I think Braden Willis by mid-season will have established himself as tight end 2.
Ooh.
I think he's going to
again. Look at how the Rams use Skoranek. Skoranek's a really interesting piece. What they do is it's clever. McVay's good. Okay, they're an 11 personnel team, right? 3 wide receivers, but in 11 personnel, your run blocking schemes are very limited. There's only so much you can do with one running back. So what you can do is run zone read, but they don't have that kind of talent. So what they do is they motion Skoranek into the backfield. And so now you have a 2-back formation against a nickel defense. And you got that nickel back in the, trying to fill gaps between the tackles, advantage offense. Or you could go base and you could have Skoranek running routes against linebackers. It's very clever. And I think they're going to do more of it this year.
It's so funny because Kittle, I retweeted a Kittle thing. Did you see that Kittle thing where he's talking about Kyle moves this guy to this side and then the defense has to switch on the fly, and it's about indecision and creating you're basically searching for creative ways to have the defense bust and you get big plays. Right. We're in an era now where the in-between player who used to be kind of like, I don't know where he fits. Now that player is becoming a classic mismatch, and it helps you hide your personnel groupings. It helps you kind of, cloud up what formation you're in, what grouping you're in. Right. It creates indecision with the defense. And I think that's right on.
That's Skoranek.
And that's Willis. Tight end? Is he a receiver?
Is he a fullback?
Is he a tight end? Yeah.
Should we do nickel? Should we do base? Oh, we're kind of screwed either way, actually. And it's like Skoranek isn't even that good. He was like almost the last pick in the draft. But if you just have him as a starting flanker, that's not really doing anything for you. But if you get creative, all of a sudden now there's no real good way to stop him. Interesting.
Right. You line Skoranek up outside every down, and he's an easy cover. But if you move him around and you switch his position and you kind of cloud up what personnel grouping you're in, and then suddenly you've got a miscommunication. Maybe you got a new player. It's week 5. You got an injury. Somebody's in there, hasn't been in there. Boom, busted play, touchdown.
Right, because again, so Skoranek's on the field. It's 11 personnel. The defense says, okay, we're going to go nickel. Well, then the Rams see that and they're like, okay, well, we're going to put Skoranek at fullback, and we're going to run power. And we're going to run power at your nickel, who's 185 pounds. How's that going to go? Okay, so let's go base then. All right, so you went base. I'm going to flex Skoranek out, put him in the slot, and now it's one-on-one against your linebacker. Like, how do you want to get burned by Ben Skoranek this time? It's very clever. The Niners could do. I think that's what they're going to try to do with Braden Willis. He's about an inch taller, 15 pounds bigger. Good player. Anyway,
I love what Willis offers as a the one thing the Niners have that is really rare, because I watch all these other teams around the league. The 49ers don't, for the most part, have a receiver, a tight end, or a back who tiptoes through the middle. Every other team in the league, you got guys who are kind of looking around. Ayuk, Debo, Juwan, Kittle. These guys run through the middle of the field without any fear. And Braden Willis fits in.
The last wide receiver they had who tiptoed through the middle of the field, God love him.
AJ Jenkins.
Dante Pettis.
Yeah, Dante Pettis.
And that's why I don't think he ever, he's not that good to begin with, but he just didn't fit this team at all because of that. All right. Why do the 49ers start slow? They have started slow 3 seasons in a row, maybe for different reasons. Or maybe there's something that ties it all together. What do you think?
It's a good question, because I actually think they ought to copy what the Rams do and value the end of the year a little bit more, especially as they add more games. And sit their guys in the preseason. They haven't done that though, right? They play their guys in the preseason, so they really shouldn't start slow. So why do they start slow? I don't know. I'm not really sure. Is it the way they go about, the play calling? Is it have to do with the way they practice? Is it just that they're playing so many games late in the year that I'll say this, like for basketball, you see a team that gets to the finals, they have a hard time kind of revving it up for the regular season. Maybe it's the Niners' success or continuous trips to the postseason makes it so they don't get fired up in the first month of the year. I'm not really sure what it is. I don't have an answer. I'm
trying to piece some things together. What I've noticed the last 3 years is they've had serious injuries at running back early in the year. Raheem Mostert got hurt week 2, 2020 against the Jets. He got hurt week 1, 2021, and Elijah Mitchell got hurt week 1, 2022. So I feel like part of the reason the Niners have kind of struggled to find an identity early in the year is they lose their starting running back immediately, and then they're so predicated on running the ball that they've kind of been floundering around trying to figure out what they do. In 2020, Mostert never really came back. Debo never really came back, and they sucked. In 2021, Debo sort of became a running back and carried him. And in 2022, McCaffrey came. So this year, they should be fine if McCaffrey's okay, theoretically. If McCaffrey's healthy and he can make it through the season, they should be fine. But if he gets hurt week 1, the Niners are back in that like, what do we do? Like, well, now we need Elijah Mitchell to stay healthy. Now we need Jordan Mason to be like an every down player. And they could all of a sudden be like in an identity crisis. I think they go as their running back goes.
That's interesting. I was going to say, if there's anything I can point to, at least thinking back to the Bears game last year, the Niners defense is got a lot of great talent on it. And I think they emphasize early, guys, let's fly around, play with energy, and make plays. But then look at that game. They had stupid penalties. And they didn't tighten their focus. I think it takes them, they want to see guys fly around and make plays. And then when guys overstep their bounds and create penalties with late hits, they go, guys, we need to tighten our focus. And they tighten their focus and they get better. They need to speak it into existence earlier this year, tighten that focus from the get-go, because the reality is it's a two-team, in my opinion, it's a two-team NFC. And you want that game in San Francisco, not Philadelphia. And that means you got to tighten your focus and play your A game, not just energy and not just flying around and not just playing hard. You got to play hard, but play smart and do it from week 1 on.
I got another one. The Niners are among the best teams in the league at game planning midseason. When Kyle Shanahan knows what he has and knows what you have, he usually outcoaches you, unless he gets in his own head or whatever. He did it like 12 weeks in a row last year. But early in the year, I mean, forget about his own identity crisis on offense, not quite knowing what he's got. But if he doesn't know what you have, if he doesn't know your team, know your coach, like week 1, they lost to the Bears last year. It was a brand new coach in his first game. I think Kyle didn't know exactly what to expect, and you didn't have his best effort. They also lost week 3 to freaking Nathaniel Hackett in his 3rd game as a head coach. He sucks. But if Kyle knows you, he usually can coach well against you. If he doesn't know you that well, if it's early in the season, if you're still figuring yourself out, whatever they talk about it. They're very specific in how they prepare. He shows the players all the fronts they're going to see. He tries to show them everything they're going to see in the game so they can counter it. If he doesn't really know, they can get out prepared, out schemed early.
It may have something to do with their quality control, not you, but in their actual quality control guys, in that so much of what they do in their run pass fusion is set up by what they've done this week. And maybe they get to a certain catalog of plays, 7, 8 games in, they can establish tendencies and then self-scout and work off their tendencies. And maybe they're running things out of a certain formation. Now they're getting more big plays because they're doing such a good job of kind of self-scouting and going against their tendencies. And maybe that leads to big plays later in the year. But they definitely, whatever it is, they ought to talk about it and try to eradicate it, because the one bye system where only one team gets the bye and only one team has, that home field is going to be, and it's going to be huge. If you say, can the Niners beat the Eagles this year? They got a hell of a lot better chance of beating them.
Thank you.
If that game's in Santa Clara than Philly.
And they already got to go to Philly once. Like, they have 5 cross-country trips. You really want to give yourself 1, 2, 3 more? I don't think you can. Honestly, this regular season schedule is so difficult that if the Niners are like a wild card team and they have to run the table on the road like they tried to do 2 years ago, they're just going to run out of gas. Teams tend to. So,
yeah.
Got to find a way to not start slow.
Yeah, unless you're just worlds better than everybody else,
Possible.
and that's not really reality in the NFL. Everybody's pretty closely grouped. Home field means a lot. And, but that's all I can figure. Maybe hone in your focus, get your play calling down, get your mismatches established. Maybe, I don't know, because the only thing is you can't put anything on film in the preseason because nobody really buys into that. So it's all based on, what do teams think you're going to do? And I think Kyle has a great advantage as the weeks go on of, hey, we'll do something in week 4 and week 6, and then we're going to bust it out in week 9, and we're going to flip it around the other way, and we're going to get a big play out of this. I think he's really good at that kind of thing, self-scouting and kind of, planning for the entire season. But maybe that works against him in the first month.
Do you think the 49ers safeties are overrated?
By some, for sure. Because, I saw who had it the other day, said that their running backs, their linebackers, and their safeties are the best in the NFL. The Niners safeties are the best in the NFL. I like
this is why the Niners have won 2 of the last 4 Super Bowls. You can see because their team is so much better than everyone else. This is why they have the rings that they have.
I mean, I think Hufanga's really good, but he had some high profile plays, and he looks like Palomalu, and everybody's just made him like some megastar. He's a really good 5th round pick. He's really smart. He's a great leader. He ain't Palomalu, and he's not like the best safety in the game. He falls off tackles. There's things that he could do to improve. He's still a young player. Tayshaun Gibson is a great center fielder, ball hawk, but he's not. I think there's better free safeties out there. Odom's a special teamer. Jair Brown's a rookie. I like Avery Young and Tyler Hawkins, but they're more depth pieces. Yeah, I think the 49er safeties. If you're telling me that this entire league doesn't have a combo better than Hufanga and Gibson. I love Hufanga, but I don't love him as much as the league loves him, or the people who grade these things out.
I like Hufanga a lot. I gotta say, I was skeptical at first. He had that stretch where he was doing way too much. D'Amico Ryans called him out publicly. I asked him. He was like, "Yeah, he's playing hero ball. He's not really doing well with his eye discipline." Ever since then, he didn't give up any more big plays. I think he's going to be better this year than last year. I think he's a serious pro. I think he's a real playmaker. I like Hufanga. I think he's going to be a fixture on this team for a while, and I think Jair Brown will too, but he hasn't played a down yet. So they could be. They have the potential, and I actually was just watching Jair Brown walk around on the field. He comes across as an A1 athlete with A1 confidence. Don't know if it'll translate, but on the field, he looked like he wasn't scared, at least from what I saw.
Did you talk to Bullocks and those guys at all? I mean,
no.
Because the depth charts that I've looked at have Jair Brown number 2 at strong safety.
I know.
And not
strange.
And not
is Andrew Hawkins at free safety?
They have Avery Young, George Odom, and Gibson at free, and then Taylor Hawkins, Jair Brown, and Hufanga at strong. I think Jair could probably play free safety.
Yeah, I'm sure he could. They're not going to anoint him early. He may not even start week 1, but I bet he'll be starting week 18.
And I love Hufanga too. I just think that when we're talking about overrated the premise is it's all based on where you're rated.
Right.
If you think he's a top tier NFL safety, I'm with you. If you're saying he's the best safety in the game, I bet you I could find somebody.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, I would take Justin Simmons and Minkah Fitzpatrick over Talanoa Hufanga. Would I take Jesse Bates over him? Probably. Other than that, I think Hufanga, you could argue. Johnson. I think you could argue that Hufanga's best hasn't shown his best yet, that he could still be improving. I'm not sure. I'm open-minded with Hufanga. I thought he was a hell of a player last year, but it'll be interesting to see how a new coordinator uses him.
Yeah, I mean, Hufanga's got some unbelievable gifts. Like,
very versatile.
If you put him in the box and let him read, he's so smart. There's no hesitation. He sees it. He goes. The problem I have is that he falls off of
coverage.
Some of his blitzes. He falls off of some of the hits. I need to see him not just hit the ball carrier. I need to see him wrap the ball carrier. That's true.
I agree.
Hit the quarterback.
I agree.
He's got to wrap the quarterback.
He also can't cover anyone man to man. Sorry.
That's not his strength. Yeah. That's not his strength.
Great in zone. Great zone eyes. Great instinctual, but you wouldn't. I mean, the offense is trying to get people on him one-on-one.
If you, to me, the perfect compliment to him would be in like Earl Thomas in his prime. You play a cover 3, you let Earl play the deep middle, cover all the grass, and you get Hufanga up on the line of scrimmage reading the mesh point. What I also love about Hufanga is if you get into this, we're just going to run it down their throat. No, you ain't, because they're going to put him up on the line of scrimmage. He's going to attack that mesh point. He's going to make plays in the backfield. So if you get too like run heavy against the Niners, Hufanga's the guy that can take you right out of that.
He had 6 tackles for loss last year.
Yeah.
He had 5 pass breakups, 4 picks.
Great dude too. Great
good player. Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's take some super chats. Double B Studio says once a player gets paid, he's out of Kyle's hand and becomes upper management safe until they get the bag minus quarterback. Kyle can replace these 1-year deal guys at will. Is that fair?
It's life in the NFL. It's
Pretty
life in the
much.
NFL, kind of.
Yeah, there's like a tiers of players. Double B Studios again says start slow because Kyle saves his best players.
Best plays, I mean.
Best plays. Sorry, I can't read. Illiterate. Or Kyle experiments first couple of games. Or just not ready from too many competitions going. Or they mentally in Cabo still. Thank you so much, Double B Studio. That was great. I don't know. Good question. I want to see how the secondary does.
Or their focus is so much late in the year. I mean, I'll say this. I mean, the Niners of the 80s, they were flat at home in September, year after year after year. There would be a September game. Niners were flat. I was at the Eagles game in 94. They lost 40-8. And that was just
that game.
one of many games where they just
that.
kind of no-showed under Walsh.
Yeah. That was Seifert, but still, I remember that game. BY says, I want to see how the secondary does. Yeah, us too. Double B says, or slow because the other teams do crazy plays early on and the stakes are less and the Niners don't do trickery college plays other teams do. The defense is weaker this year, in my opinion. They lost like 4 or 5 starters. Losing Azeez Al-Shaair, people act like it's no big deal. They don't have a replacement for him. They might have a solid player, but Azeez was a good player, in my opinion.
Very good. Not only that, I thought he was a tone-setting player. One other thing to why they start slow, go back to that Chicago game. The things that stand out to me were the Greenlaw over-aggressive late hit, but also weren't there 2 busted play touchdowns? So I think it's just about attention to detail and communication on the back end. And that's where maybe Wilkes – I'll say this, from listening to Lenore and some of the DBs talk at the podium and listening to Steve Wilkes, I think he's going to hold these guys to a much higher level of accountability individually and collectively than maybe they have been held to in the past. I get the sense that he doesn't mess. You know what I mean? I mean, Lenore was like, I watched film. I was bad. I was really bad. He actually wasn't bad. It wasn't really bad, but I like guys who
he was bad at the catch point. He was bad at the catch point.
But I'd rather have guys who show up going, you know what? I stunk than, hey, man.
Saying I wasn't that bad.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Kyle with Chargers would be deadly. Yeah, if he could keep his quarterback healthy, Kyle would be deadly. If he could keep his quarterback upright, he probably would have a ring right now. So what else we want to talk about? Okay, is it better for quarterbacks to train away from the team in the offseason than with the team?
Well, this could be argued either way. I can see why it's good to get another set of eyes on whether it's Trey's form, Brock's form. But, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, this is where I think that the guy who gets burned the most from the NFL's stringent rules on how little you can be in the facility at certain times in the offseason is the quarterback. Because I think the quarterbacks used to just live in the facility in the offseason, and there was that constant dialogue with the coaches, and you had players coming in to run routes. Maybe it would be not the same receivers, but you were throwing to your receivers on your field with your coaches watching it. And now, and to me, offensive football is so much about continuity. Now you got guys with their theories, and what if their theories don't jive with the coaching staff's theories? And now you're kind of working against each other. You're getting reps, but you're not getting reps with your receivers and your coaches, And what if the Niners don't like what Christensen is saying to Lance? Or what if they don't like what Beck is saying to Lance? Or what if these guys that Purdy's working with in Jacksonville, have a different philosophy than the Niners offensive staff? So personally, I think it was better when they did all their work in the offseason, or most of it, let's say, in the facility.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, like, maybe Kyle Shanahan structures his staff this way, knowing he can't have that much hands-on time with the quarterback, because his quarterback coach isn't a passing instructor. He's like a life coach who played the position. Like the passing instructors are guys that aren't really on NFL rosters. They're like John Beck and Jeff Christensen. They're these independent contractors who sort of take over in the offseason. And I think probably Jeff Christensen has more to teach Trey Lance about throwing a football than Kyle Shanahan or Brian Griese combined. So in that sense, don't be with the Niners. Go someplace with someone who knows what they're doing.
The other thing I think is one interesting thing is that, like, Brock Purdy's success this year was partially predicated to his footwork in the short game. Because if your footwork is off in the short game, you're generally off. I wonder, and I don't know either way, so I'm just kind of wondering aloud, where did he get that impeccable footwork in the short game? Because he just had it. And then you look at some of the other quarterbacks, Jimmy, Trey, Darnold so far. I don't see the precision in the footwork in the short game. So I kind of wonder, did Brock get that from Campbell at Iowa State? Did he already have that? Because his footwork in that short game was just like very veteran like. And they do run the short game a lot in the NFL, way more than they used to. And so I think your footwork and your lower half and all that stuff is so much more vital to operate that short game. And Purdy had it. And I don't know if he got it from the Niners because he had it as a rookie.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he had it already. It seems kind of like Kyle Shanahan sort of relies on others to develop the quarterbacks in terms of mechanics. And then what he can add is a scheme, a very good scheme with very good players as well. But in terms of like teaching the basics, that's not really what he does. And maybe that's harder to do than we realize. But yeah, I think it's kind of better for quarterbacks to train away from the 49ers in the offseason because that's not what Kyle has to offer. He has a scheme. That's what his dad offered too. A run game, a play action game. It's great. But like in terms of like footwork, drops, all of that, there's other more qualified people to teach that.
One of the guys I thought had the best offseason years ago was Alex Smith. And it was an offseason where he like held camp in, was it San Jose State?
Yeah. And that was during the lockout.
And he got like 75% or 80% of his receivers to go down there. And
that team didn't start slow.
And that was the year that Alex like looked
13-3.
Yeah, I mean, he looked like he was totally in lockstep with his guys.
For the first time.
Yeah.
Stuff matters. So it's too bad they can't.
There's no doubt. I think to be honest, if there's one thing that I really thought Trey looked better than Darnold and Allen in the OTAs is that Trey knows the receivers better through reps than Darnold and Allen did, and it showed, I thought.
One thing I wanted to say, maybe I just don't understand league rules, but instead of like tight end U, where George Kittle organizes this big event for tight ends across the league, like couldn't you do like Camp Kittle and just invite people from the 49ers? Like why not? How about that? Instead of getting all the tight ends in the league prepared for the season, how about Camp Kittle invite all your teammates that want to come, it's not mandatory, and actually work out with people that you're going to be playing with this year? I mean, how about that?
Don't do the investment in the position, invest in your teammates.
Your team! I don't understand, but I guess I'm 35 years old. That makes me really old and out of touch.
Well, it's the whole concept is new, right? Of like a tight end U. I'd love to talk to Kittle a little bit more about how that whole thing evolved and came together because I think it's kind of cool that he's like giving back to like younger tight ends and there's real tutelage that goes into playing football, especially that position. But I agree. I would love to see him pour all that energy into helping Cameron Latu become the next Kittle.
Thank you. Like Kittle, God love you. Tight end U, it's a selfless. Well, I'm not saying selfless, but it's a good thing. But you could do that after you retire. Right now, you could do Camp Kittle for the 49ers and or do both. You could do both. Both. I don't know. I just feel like if you're doing tight end U, you should probably carve out a little time for Camp Kittle.
Does Latu and Willis go to camp? Tight end?
I don't know, but I did see. I think
Trey was there,
but I did see George Kittle saying in front of everyone that Sam Laporta was the best tight end in the draft. It's like, what about Cam Latu though? What about your teammate?
Yeah,
don't you want to lie or something?
He loves his Iowa.
Josh Wyatt says Hufanga reminds me of Fred Warner at safety. Instinctive, smart, hard-nosed with professional eyes. We focus too much on limitations. I see what you mean. On that. They do have a lot in common.
I mean, to me, what I see there are, and also high character guys.
No doubt.
Guys who really show up to win. Like,
no doubt.
You're not going to see a smiling Hufanga or a smiling Fred Warner after a loss. They're just not.
No.
They're not going to smile. They're not going to be. But if these are the guys that show up to beat you. And if they beat you, they're happy. And if they don't beat you, they're not. And there's no exceptions to that rule.
Best guess, is Hufanga going to get a Mondo second contract from the 49ers? Best guess. Way too early guess.
Yeah, I say yes. I say yes because he is his limitations um, can be schemed around, and also he works on it. To me, I thought he looked like he's in better shape than ever, and he's also kind of like a coach on the field. He's the first
I think
guy
he's
in
a
every
vet.
drill, and he's the first
Yep.
guy out there, and he's just
Yep.
when the safeties were off to the side the other day or whatever it was, he's like talking to the coach, talking to the players. I mean, he's a coach on the field. He really is, and that's overused, but he really is.
And like you could tell that he works out with Troy Polamalu. You could tell that he has a really good mentor because experienced people who've been successful tell young people stuff like little things like be the first one out there, be the first one to do every drill. It's the kind of thing like when I first started on the beat, my dad would say, sit front and center every press conference, sit front and center every press. Don't hide in the back. Let them know you're there. Let them know. Let them see you. Let them know you mean business. That's how my dad is. Little things like that matter. And Hufunga's that kind of a guy. I definitely think he's going to get the big contract. And this is a contract year for him, everyone, if you don't realize. He's getting the extension after this year. So I would expect another all-pro effort from Talanoa. Anoop says, start your best O-line personnel for once. Williams, Banks, Feliciano, Pryor, Burford right tackle, his natural position. Latu next to right tackle.
That's interesting. That is interesting.
Maybe if you wanted your best pass protecting unit, but that's not going to give Kyle the run blocking he wants on the right side, fortunately.
And I don't know that that is
Burford.
their best alignment. I agree with Feliciano. I do agree with Feliciano is probably their best center. That to me is going to be really interesting.
Yeah. I'm
Jake
not sold
Brendel
on
was
Brendel.
a Pro Bowl alternate, and he's smart and he's like.
I'm not sure why.
Yeah, but I mean, I think Feliciano is a better player. We'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah, I like Brendel, good season, but I'm open minded to Feliciano as well. I feel like Brendel is serviceable. I'm not sure why he was a Pro Bowl alternate. He was
Dallas just drafted one of the biggest, strongest nose guards the league's ever seen. This Mozzie Smith.
Yep.
They may need a guy like Feliciano.
Also, what did Philly do?
Philly just brought in Jalen Carter.
Right.
So you're talking about big-bodied guys in the middle who could overpower a Brendel. Feliciano is a badass. He's an anchor. He weighs more. He's tough. I'm not saying Brendel's not tough. I think Brendel's more of a technician. Right. But Feliciano is a broad human being.
Yes.
I mean,
bigger.
He's really wide. Pryor,
like Brendel might not even be 300 pounds. Brendel might be 295.
Right. Feliciano's
like 325.
Yeah, I mean, he's something like that. I kind of, I'll tell you the guy that I'm really eager to see is Leroy Watson, because in the mini camp, this guy looked like he had a great offseason. I mean, he's bigger, stronger, and he's got real tackle size. I wonder about Burford as a tackle. I think Burford might be more of a guard than a tackle.
Yeah, that's what they're telling us. That's what Forster says as well. Sirs11 says, Grant, I was dying laughing at your live take yesterday with the guy who wouldn't get to his point, trying to call you out, the one with the lisps. Shout out BD49ers. It was a good segment. He had a bunch of receipts, which I'm always down for people to call me out and have my receipts. But if he was trying to make it seem like I loved Brock Purdy and called him a franchise quarterback, and now I'm saying that he's not a franchise quarterback or he sucks. I think he's good. I think he's a good starting quarterback. I'm not sure he can win a Super Bowl. That's essentially where I stand right now. I think that's where I stood the whole time. But if you have,
I think you've been
conflicting evidence.
I think you've been consistent. I mean,
I like him.
I feel like I could describe exactly how you feel about Brock Purdy. That you like him, you were surprised by him, but you like him. You respect what he's been able to accomplish, but you're looking at a league that was commandeered by Mahomes, and you're thinking, long term, if the Niners are getting this thing done, do they need a higher end performer at quarterback with a bigger arm, with better athleticism?
I don't know, but I am wondering. Yeah.
I mean,
I don't have the answer. Yeah, that's fair. All right. Last topic. So we started with this. I keep coming back to this. Everyone respects what the Niners have built. And they break it down like they have the best defense. They have the best weapons. They have the best wide receiver tight end combo. They have the best dual threat running back. They have the best offensive minded coach, not named Andy Reid. Like they have so much going for them. And they've had all this since 2019, essentially. And yet they don't have a Super Bowl ring. And when you add all that up and you ask why no ring, people say, well, injuries or luck or this or that. And there's got to be something the Niners can do differently. There's got to be something standing in their way that they can address and not just say, we're going to keep doing the same exact thing every single year and wait for things to go our way. Because a lot has gone their way the last few years. What would you say the last thing standing in their way is?
Wow. Okay,
is it a flaw in the blueprint? Is it something?
I would say okay. There's a couple things. I really think they lost the Chief game because they did not have DJ Jones. So you gotta have
that's a good call.
Key. Yeah, you gotta have your key guys healthy at the end of the year. That's one. Mm-hmm. And they haven't always had. They've missed some key guys. I mean, they didn't have Mosley. I thought Mosley was a key guy. They've kind of run out of players at times. But as far as something they can control, I think it's that Thursday meeting, that Friday meeting when they're sitting out and they're planning in an ideal world. How many touches do we want for these guys? Where do we want to, they got a lot of weapons and they got a lot of choices and they got an array of plays, right? I think there's sometimes there's too much respect for the opponent. Dallas game would be my example there. Sometimes there's not enough respect for the opponent. Philly game at the end of the first half, the aggressiveness. But I would just say, make sure that your money is on the field and that your money is touching the ball. So Ayuk, Debo, Kittle, McCaffrey, that's your money. Make sure they're rested and touching the ball a lot in the biggest games, and take your 5 or 6 key defensive players and make sure they are healthy and rested for the playoffs. And if you gotta play McCaffrey less snaps, play McCaffrey less snaps. If you gotta substitute more and pull Hargrave off the field in the fourth quarter, especially Bosa. Bosa is a difference maker. I don't want to see Bosa in 17-point games in the fourth quarter piling up stats. You're going to pay him his $33 million guaranteed. He's going to get record-setting money. You tell him when he plays, a 10-sack season from Bosa could be more valuable than a 15-sack season from Bosa, because what really matters is when you get in the playoffs, you need a full-run Bosa, not a guy that's been played a ton of snaps and has been chipped a ton. And that's the other reason why I would go get one more defensive end, because if you don't, Bosa's going to take a lot more physical punishment, chip via doubles and chips and that kind of thing. I'll spend some draft capital to go get a Montez Sweat, to go get a Chase Young. I'll spend the cap room to go get Ngakoue. Load up on your defensive line so they can't load up on Nick. Make sure that you get to the playoffs with Bosa. Who's the most important guys on defense are Greenlaw, Warner, Charvarius, Bosa, Hargrave, let's just say. Make sure that those guys come off the field in the fourth quarter when you have a significant lead, and see and plan for the big picture. Plan to be playing in February. That'll be my approach.
Yeah. I like it. To me, though, like, the defense hasn't been the reason that this team hasn't won a Super Bowl yet. When I look at their 2020 was an injury year, but the other years they lost in the Super Bowl, I believe. Put it this way. I think anytime their quarterbacks have a clean pocket, whether it's Jimmy, Trey, Brock, I know for a fact Brock's numbers are off the charts when he has a clean pocket. Off the charts. But pass protection is not an emphasis on this team. Essentially, quarterbacks have to protect themselves. So in the 2019 fourth quarter Super Bowl, the offensive line folded. Chris Jones dominated. And Jimmy Garoppolo was the scapegoat. But the offensive line folded in that game down the stretch. It folded in the fourth quarter against the Rams 2 years later. And it folded immediately against the Eagles. I mean, it folded against the Cowboys too. Like, what was it? 50% pressure rate? It's just that the Niners won with defense and gave up 12 points. I think pass protection is what's holding them back. They have a great D-line. They're invested everywhere. But their pass protection is like Moneyball stuff. The only player on the offensive line who's there for pass protection is the left tackle. Everyone else is a run blocker first. So I just think the design of it is all wrong. This is 2023. You got to be able to pass better. It's nice that you have this great running game, but it's not going to deliver you a Super Bowl. You have to have better pass protection. And that's not just your offensive line. That's what you emphasize. That's not calling 7-step drop play action passes against Hassan Reddick with Tyler Kroft blocking him. I mean, it's a whole emphasis. It's not there. That's what I think.
Well, and then if you see a team that's cheating, it's like, if there's hitters in baseball that cheat. And what I mean by
sit on
that
fastballs.
Well, they're going to be like Edgar Renteria was going to get pounded on a fastball in the World Series, and what did he do? He cheated. He guessed fastball, and he got his hands going early. He got a fastball, and he hit it out for a 3-run shot. Mm-hmm. Don't go to play action if you're going up against a team like Philly that's not honoring your play action fakes. Just find other ways to, don't just be like, hey, we like play action as part of our game. And they're not honoring the play action fakes. Don't do something else beyond play action to create separation and create, chunk yard plays. I mean, it's to me, that's
a good point.
Don't ignore that there are some teams out there that aren't going to honor play action fakes at all. Whether it doesn't matter what the score is, it doesn't matter what the matchup is. That's the way they're going about it.
Isn't that the best way to defend a Kyle Shanahan offense? I mean, we all talk about what makes him so good. Well, the play action passes look just like the runs and they get people wide open. Only if you honor the play action fakes. If you come in with a defensive mindset like, look, we'll live with them running the ball, but anytime they want to do a lazy little play action pass, we're going to kill this quarterback. Kill him.
Right. And we'll take our chances. We'll take our chances. And we're not. Yeah. And what you're essentially doing is you're giving the defense an extra second to get to your quarterback. Mm-hmm. That's when you got to hit them with quick hitters and make sure that if they're not going to honor your play action fake, that you find another way.
And that's why I feel like Kyle Shanahan can be in his bag. If he really knows a defensive coordinator, he can exploit him. But did you not know that the Eagles do that? Like, that play call seemed like he thought he was going to slow down that pass rush. You had Debo coming around. It seemed like he thought he was going to confuse that defense, but none of that slowed him down. So it felt like whatever his game plan was, his scouting was, it was off that week. Didn't have the desired effect.
Also, I think we saw it in the way they attacked the draft. It's like not every weapon has to be a receiver. You've got a bevy of guys. Emphasize blocking more on the line of scrimmage at tight end. I think Dwelly's going to have a real hard time making this football team this summer because now you got Latu, now you got Willis. They're both known as blockers. Willis is a strong blocker in space. Latu's a strong blocker with his lower half on the line of scrimmage.
They might have to keep 4 to keep Dwelly around at this point.
Emphasize blocking.
I think they might keep 4 tight ends this year. I just have a feeling that we're going to see more of a 2 tight end offense. We're going to start to see a little bit.
It's going to be hard to though, Grant, because I mean, they love to keep 10 D linemen, and they drafted some young players in the secondary, so I think they're going to keep 10 DBs. So
if they keep 5 wide receivers, they can keep 4 tight ends.
Loaded linebacking core, and you got
keep 5 tight ends. Keep 5 wide receivers though.
You're going to keep 5 wide receivers.
They just re-signed Dwelly.
Three quarterbacks. You're going to have 3 quarterbacks on your active roster. So, yeah, it's going to be tough.
I don't think you can waive Dwelly though. They just re-signed him. I think you might be able to trade Dwelly. Dwelly's a pro. They would take him in. They would take him in Miami. They would take him in New York. Anyway, I think there might be a market for Dwelly.
Well, you know what's interesting? That to me, I did a little exercise the other day, and I went through the roster, the camp roster, and I thought, okay, no, I mean, obviously, there's going to be injuries and all kinds of different things that affect things. But I just was going through looking for the 53, and what I got to was there's at least a half dozen players that the 49ers may be too good to cut, but not good enough to make the team. And those are the guys that I'm looking for Lynch and Peters to turn into 2024 day 3 draft choices. And I think, I mentioned Juwan, but Zane Gonzalez, the kicker, could be coveted by some people. Whatever linebacker doesn't make it could be coveted by some people. Javon Kinlaw, if he doesn't make it, he could be coveted. There's a number of guys on this team that Ambry Thomas, if he doesn't make it, you might be able to find a day 3 pick if he plays well. So they're going to have a good competition, but they've got, I would say, 5 or 6 guys that they may be able to swing deals for before the cut down.
I kind of get the feeling this is Kyle Juszczyk's final season on the team. He'll be 33 next year. He'll have no guaranteed money in his contract next year. His cap number will be almost $7.6 million. I have a feeling if he misses a little time, they'll kind of experiment with Braden Willis in his role. And if Braden Willis does well, they might just go with the younger guy. So I'm curious to see what happens with Juszczyk this year. This might be, talk about, this could be it for him and Juwan Jennings. Final year here.
Don't forget about Coletto, too. The one thing about Jack Coletto, he was a mechanical engineering major at Oregon State. So you're talking about a guy who's really, really smart. And that's what they love in their fullback. They've got a dizzying array of formations and pre-snap motions and shifting. And a guy like Coletto's got the mental capacity to digest the entire thing. He's not quite the athlete that Juszczyk is, but I could see a redshirt year for Coletto and some combination of Coletto and Willis replacing Juice next year. Josh
White says Green Bay tried not honoring play action in the NFC Championship game. If you do that consistently, you'll get embarrassed. The Niners never passed in that game.
Yeah. And that's another thing, too. If you're going up against a team like Philly and they got 70 sacks and they're coming at you, maybe that's a run-heavy scheme.
Maybe run the ball.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's interesting. Some of the Kyle's playoff games, they've run it so much. Other times, they probably, like Atlanta, they probably didn't run enough against New England in the Super Bowl. But I
just don't understand how Kyle can win.
I'd run the ball.
How can he win an NFC Championship game throwing 8 times and then turn around and tell you he had to throw on 2nd and 6 in the first quarter from midfield? Like, dude, why? You have Christian McCaffrey. Your entire offensive line is built to run block. Run the ball. Like, what are you doing, man? No, we're going to go play action here.
Who's the number 1 competitor in their division? Seattle. What was Seattle against the run last year? 26th. What have they done to improve their run? Nothing. Their run defense, I should say. So, I mean, I think the game plan this year,
they brought in Bobby Wagner.
Run Debo, run your backs. To me, if there's one guy that could change their whole look this year, it's Jordan Mason. Because Mason, I think, is ready to not just run a little bit. He's not I don't see him as a compliment. I see him as a burgeoning star.
Yeah. And if the Niners could just rotate their running backs and keep them all healthy and use them, they might just win the Super Bowl. Larry, what you got going on the rest of the day?
I get my kids playing postseason baseball in the afternoon, and then I'm doing a live stream tonight with John Lund, my good buddy from KMBR. We'll talk a little bit about the Niners. We'll start with the Niners. We'll talk a little about the Red Hot Giants, and maybe even a little look back at the Warrior draft. So I'm visiting with the great John Lund tonight.
Nice. How old's your son?
He's 14.
What position?
14. He plays second base in the outfield.
Nice. Where in the outfield?
Usually on the flanks, usually right field or left field.
I feel you.
But 14 is at that age where you guys
finally getting some fly balls. Some fly balls.
Suddenly, like, outfield play is important.
I love outfield.
Hit your freaking cutoff, man.
Absolutely, and it's better to one hop the guy than to throw it over his head.
Yeah,
always.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, good show. Thanks for watching, everyone. Go check out Larry. I'll be back tomorrow with my pops.